Did I just hear someone drilling into my living room wall from the other side? That was the exact moment I froze mid-chew, spoon dangling mid-air, cereal turning to mush, as a god-awful mechanical buzz roared from behind my bookshelf, like a raccoon with a cordless drill had gone rogue. I didn't know it then, but that was the exact second my neighbor Karen declared an all-out, no-holds-barred war on my Wi-Fi. What kicked off as a few weird lags on my Zoom calls would soon spiral into the most off-the-wall tech feud this neighborhood has ever seen, complete with goats, government agents, and a viral meltdown that would live forever online. It all started when my internet decided to die a slow, painful death. At first, I chalked it up to a minor hiccup. Maybe a squirrel farted on the line or something. See, I work from home as a cybersecurity analyst, so I track bandwidth usage the way other people count calories. I ran every diagnostic tool I had, speed tests, ping tracers, deep dive router scans, and everything came back clean, which only made things weirder. But it wasn't just a slowdown. It felt like something was draining my connection dry. Web pages loaded slower than a dial-up on life support. My cloud backups tanked over and over. And the final nail in the coffin? My live demo call with a federal cybersecurity firm tanked halfway through, right as I was showing them a real-time breach scenario. I cursed out the ISP. I dropped cash on a new router. Nada. That's when the crazy thought hit me. What if this wasn't random? Now Karen, the lady who lives on the other side of my duplex, has always treated things like rules and basic decency as optional, like napkins at a gas station. This is the same woman who once tried to have my recycling bin impounded because the color violated the HOA's visual harmony. She's the kind of person who reported my Halloween jack-o'-lantern as a satanic altar and threatened to call the cops when a 10-year-old drew a rainbow on the sidewalk. Karen doesn't just follow the rules, she weaponizes them. But even for her, stealing internet seemed excessive. Then came the buzzing. At first, it was just this low, mosquito-like hum, like angry bees buzzing in a kazoo, coming from the wall we shared. But within a few days, that hum turned into full-blown chaos. Grinding, clicking, then a high-pitched squeal that could only mean one thing: power tools. Around 11:30 one night, I heard distinct whirring, followed by short, aggressive drilling sounds. That's when I knew she was up to something shady. So, I did what any slightly unhinged cybersecurity guy would do. I installed a fiber optic wall cam, the kind you normally use to check for rats or leaky pipes. Only, what I found made rats look like teddy bears. I snaked the camera through an outlet hole, angled it just right, and nearly choked on my own breath. Tucked neatly between the insulation and studs was an orange cable splitter, wired up to a glowing green repeater box. It wasn't mine. The cable ran clean through a freshly drilled hole, straight into Karen's unit. This woman had actually drilled through our shared wall to jack into my network. I stared at that screen like I was watching a raccoon write JavaScript. Right there on camera. Theft, vandalism, and home invasion, all rolled into one absurd Karen-sized tantrum. I didn't react. Not immediately. I needed time to plot something worthy of the crime. I could have stormed over, yelled, even called the cops. But nah, Karen didn't deserve justice. She deserved theater. So I got to work on what I proudly dubbed the GOAT protocol. Step 1. Step 2. Stuff it all inside an old repeater case. Step 3. Program the speaker to randomly emit the sound of a distressed goat. While she was outside shrieking at the mailman for walking too close to her mulch bed, I slipped into the crawl space, swapped her janky repeater with my rigged one, and retreated like a hacker ninja. At exactly 7:42 the next morning, it began. Karen was in full banshee mode, mid-Zoom yoga scream fest. When the first soft bleat rippled through the wall, it started gentle, a polite little bah. Then 5 seconds later, BHHH. It was long, dramatic, and sounded like a goat possessed by Satan. Her screech shook the drywall. "What is that noise?" Meanwhile, I was chilling at my desk, coffee in hand, enjoying flawless download speeds and inner peace. 10 minutes later, she was pounding on my door like she was auditioning for cops. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Hair wild, yoga mat gripped like a legal weapon. I blinked innocently. Doing? Just savoring my premium broadband. Her eyes narrowed. Then they darted to the wall behind me. "There's something wrong with the wiring. I think there's an animal in the wall." I nodded thoughtfully. "Might be a goat." She looked like her brain was buffering. "You're messing with me," she growled. I gave a half smile and slowly closed the door. Over the next few days, the bleeding returned. Random, unpredictable. Always just enough to wreck her online meetings or Netflix deep dives into fluoride conspiracies. Then I took it up a notch. I rerouted her stolen signal to a page that played a looping video of a screaming goat with the words, "You shall not bleat." The neighborhood took notice. Karen, now fully unhinged, started knocking on doors, asking if anyone else heard phantom livestock. One guy joked, "Maybe it's your spirit animal begging for release." She didn't laugh. I watched her one afternoon wandering the yard with a radio frequency scanner, waving it like a ghost detector. It beeped near the wall port. She screamed, again. But me? I stayed chill. I let the crazy marinate. I even acted concerned when she came by ranting about psychic goat harassment. "That's awful," I said, nodding. "You think it might be haunted?" That evening, I triggered a half-volume bleat during her book club. 4 women left early. One posted a Yelp review. "Bleeding, 1 star." What Karen didn't realize was, this was only the pre-show. She hadn't just poked the bear, she poked the goat. And when you drill into my wall to steal my Wi-Fi, you don't just get cut off, you get bleeded. I spotted her pacing in her driveway, arms stretched upward like she was trying to douse for water, her phone raised like it was a sacred relic. She spun in little circles, eyes darting wildly, clearly desperate to locate the origin of the bleats. At one point, she marched right up to our shared wall, pressed both palms against it like a psychic medium, and whispered something under her breath. I couldn't hear what it was, but the deranged fire in her eyes made it obvious. She wasn't just annoyed. She believed the house itself had turned on her. The best part about my prank wasn't just the chaos, it was the sheer precision of it. The jammer was smart. It only kicked in when her specific devices tried to connect. Her tablet, her laptop, her smart TV, all of it. Every time she so much as clicked connect, the system would block her, replace the signal with an operatic goat scream, and reroute her browser to my beautifully coded static page. To the rest of the world, the Wi-Fi worked like a charm. But to Karen, the internet had become a bleeding nightmare of digital livestock and judgment. It was beautiful. Naturally, Karen escalated things. She's not the suffer in silence type. She's more of a professional screamer, a walking complaint form, a one-woman Yelp mob. Next morning, I woke up to a letter taped to my front door. Official HOA letterhead and everything. It accused me of auditory disruptions, unlicensed signal emissions, and my personal favorite, neighborhood-wide electronic contamination. I read it twice, mostly for the comedy. Apparently, Karen had claimed I was operating illegal farm equipment inside my home and sheltering dangerous animals for vindictive reasons. The HOA even threatened me with fines and a formal disciplinary hearing if the goat-based disturbance continued. I didn't get mad. I got strategic. Instead of firing back with a counter letter, I assembled a care package that would have made a tech lawyer cry tears of joy. 3 labeled USB drives, a diagram of the unauthorized repeater Karen had installed in my wall, and time-stamped footage of her drilling, complete with infrared captures from my hidden wall cam. I slipped it all into a padded envelope and personally dropped it into the HOA president's mailbox. Sealed, delivered. Devastating. 3 days passed, silence. Then like magic, The ridiculous HOA notice disappeared from my door. Not a word said, not a peep made. Karen, of course, had no idea that her little smear campaign had already crashed and burned before liftoff. So she did what any self-respecting suburban villain would do. She stormed into the HOA meeting with a stack of dramatic printouts and a Sharpie diagram that probably looked like conspiracy art. I didn't go, but my friend on the landscaping committee live texted me updates like it was the Super Bowl. One photo showed Karen pointing at a whiteboard with "the bleeding" scrawled in blood-red marker. Another had half the HOA board staring at her like she'd just confessed to believing goats were government spies. But Karen wasn't done swinging. Her next move? She hired what I can only describe as a freelance paranormal IT guy. Tall, twitchy, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too small, and carrying a backpack that rattled when he walked. I watched them skulk around her property like they were on a ghost hunt. At one point, he pulled out what looked like a spaghetti strainer wired to a potato battery, waved it in the air like a magic wand, and shouted something about EMF fields. Then, he climbed onto her roof, jabbed at the sky with a plastic rod, and started poking her vents with a screwdriver. I'd seen better equipment in dollar store Nerf guns. According to my neighbor across the street, things got weird, fast. Karen's expert came flying out of the house, yelling something about feedback loops and interdimensional interference. She offered to double his pay if he could shut down the goat chaos. He declined, without even blinking, muttered something about karmic Wi-Fi, and bolted. Karen stood in her driveway afterward, pale and shaking, like the Matrix had glitched in her living room. Meanwhile, I kept my halo polished. Every time I saw her, I offered the friendliest wave you've ever seen and smiled like I was running for HOA president. One morning, I even brought over a basket of grocery store muffins and said, "Hey, I hope that weird noise cleared up. Might have been a squirrel." She accepted the muffins like I'd handed her live explosives. Her hands actually trembled. She knew. Oh, she absolutely knew. But she couldn't prove it without sounding like a goat-obsessed conspiracy theorist. Still, Karen wasn't down for the count. Not yet. 4 nights later, just past midnight, a knock rattled my front door and snapped me awake. I opened it to find a police officer, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We've got a noise complaint," he muttered. "Something about barnyard animals inside the house?" I almost laughed out loud. Almost. But I played dumb, invited him in, even offered him a cup of coffee. He looked around, took in my spotless, pet-free living room, and sighed. "She's called 3 times this week," he said, rubbing his temple. "We gotta follow up, but between you and me, it's starting to feel like harassment." Without a word, I handed him the same USB drive I'd given the HOA. He popped it in, watched the footage of her repeater, the drilling, the exposed cables. His jaw tightened. "She really drilled into your wall?" he asked. I nodded. "And tried to hijack your Wi-Fi?" I handed him a second clip, Karen shouting at her computer while the goat scream echoed behind her. He snorted. "Well, that's different." He promised to file a formal report. Karen had officially crossed the line from neighborhood menace to criminal punchline. But I wasn't about to let the saga end there. No, it was time for the final form of the GOAT protocol. I upgraded the redirect page to include a flashing red alert and a countdown clock. Every time she tried to connect, her screen now blared, "GOAT alert initiated," rebooting barn mode in 5, 4, 3. Then came the distorted bleating, the glitchy goat laughter, and a deep booming voice that intoned, "You have been banished." The next morning, Karen didn't leave her house, didn't even crack her curtains. Later, I heard she'd called her cousin in Montana to ask if router exorcisms were a real thing. Meanwhile, I made myself a big breakfast, parked on my porch, and streamed a 4K mountain goat documentary at full volume. I even waved at her dark window. No response. Because at this point, it wasn't just about payback anymore. It was about justice. It was about honor. It was about digitally weaponized barnyard chaos. Because when someone drills through your wall and steals from you, you don't just fight back. You make sure they never forget the sound of vengeance bleeding through drywall. Now it was my turn to shine. And believe me, I still had a few wild cards left in the deck. The morning after the cop visit, the whole neighborhood was buzzing, like someone had kicked over a gossip beehive. Karen's goat-fueled feud had gone full-blown public spectacle. It started with sweet old Mrs. Pennington from down the street, who casually told her gardening club that Karen was under federal investigation for secretly housing livestock. By lunchtime, that rumor mutated like bacteria in a petri dish. Somebody claimed she was running a black market petting zoo in her attic. By sunset, a neighbor swore she was using illegal goats to mine some sort of dairy-based cryptocurrency. None of it was remotely true. But honestly, that didn't matter anymore. Karen had officially become suburban folklore, and I hadn't even broken a sweat. She did not take the fame well. Karen had always thrived on power, the queen bee of HOA drama, barking citations like some clipboard-wielding tyrant. But now, that power was slipping through her fingers like overcooked spaghetti. And the more she tried to snatch it back, the more ridiculous she looked. That evening, I saw her stomping around outside, clutching her RF detector like it was a holy artifact, scanning every electronic device on her property like she expected one to confess under pressure. She stopped in front of the neighborhood lamppost, glared at it for a solid minute, then snapped a picture, like she was filing charges against the power grid. The next day brought a new twist. A man in a suit came strolling up my driveway, clipboard in hand, looking like he'd walked out of an HOA promotional brochure. He knocked politely, introduced himself as Martin, president of the HOA. Trailing right behind him, like a storm cloud in Crocs, was Karen. She looked like she'd just crawled out of a microwave, hair in a scraggly bun, eyes twitching with sleepless paranoia. Martin cleared his throat. We've received multiple complaints about unusual noise levels, and we'd like to resolve this amicably. I smiled wide. Of course. I invited them both in. Karen didn't wait for pleasantries. She went full lunatic and beelined straight to the shared wall, pressed her ear against the drywall, and started mumbling like the house was whispering secrets. I offered coffee. Martin declined with a polite wave. Karen acted like I didn't exist. Martin did his little tour, inspecting outlets, snapping a few photos, nodding solemnly like he had any idea what he was looking at. That's when I dropped the hammer. I casually opened my laptop, pulled up the surveillance footage, and hit play. There on the screen was grainy but unmistakable footage of Karen, standing in her living room, cordless drill in hand, boring a hole straight into our shared wall. Martin froze. Karen went rigid. The video kept playing, showing her snaking a cable extender through the hole, wrapping it with duct tape and hooking it to a signal repeater. You could even hear her mutter, "Finally, he'll never notice." I turned to Martin, smiled sweetly. "So, I'm guessing there's a clause about structural tampering." Martin cleared his throat, adjusted his tie like it was choking him. Yes, Article 12, Section B, unauthorized drilling into shared property. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off with clip number 2. This one showed the inside of the wall cavity, now containing my goat-spewing repeater. The bleat echoed through the void as Karen stomped around her living room, screeching at her iPad while the screen displayed "Goat Alert Initiated." The silence afterward? Chef's kiss. Karen finally snapped. "This is harassment. It's a slightly unorthodox network response. He weaponized livestock." Martin stared at her like she'd just announced she married a toaster. I didn't say a word, just leaned back with my arms crossed, soaking in the absurdity. Martin stood up, straightened his blazer. "I think this meeting is concluded." Karen shrieked something about justice, but Martin was already heading for the door. 2 hours later, I got an email from the HOA legal team. Karen's complaint? Dismissed. Her actions? Officially cited for property damage, unauthorized installation, and electronic interference. Game, set, goat, or so I thought. Karen wasn't just embarrassed anymore. She was desperate. That same evening, she played her last wild card, and oh boy, it was a doozy. She called the police again, but this time, not to report a noise complaint. No, this time she claimed I was launching a cyber attack on the entire neighborhood. She told them my house was emitting dangerous frequencies and needed to be shut down immediately. The cops showed up again, looking more annoyed than alarmed. One officer sighed and asked if I'd consent to a voluntary inspection. I agreed without hesitation. Once inside, I walked them through my very ordinary, extremely goat-free home. No contraband tech, no secret barn, just solid Wi-Fi and a suspiciously satisfied homeowner. Then I handed them the full dossier: photos, product IDs, timestamps, technical readouts, even the receipt from the sketchy signal theft site Karen had bought her repeater from. One of the officers blinked. "She really drilled through your wall?" I nodded and offered him a cookie. As they wrapped up the inspection, the younger officer asked, "Mind if I copy some of this? Honestly, this might be the weirdest report I've filed all month." I handed him a flash drive. They left chuckling. Across the street, Karen was posted up on her lawn, arms folded like a cursed gargoyle, glaring at me like I'd hexed her ancestors. She knew she was losing, but the real kicker came the next morning. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop in front of Karen's house. Matte finish, dark-tinted windows, definitely not the local precinct. Out stepped a man in a tailored gray suit, lanyard clipped to a badge that gleamed even in the shade. I watched from my porch, stunned. As he approached her front door, Karen answered looking like a shaken raccoon in slippers. I didn't catch everything he said, but I heard enough to know this story wasn't over. Not yet. Federal communications, unauthorized signals, interference patterns, emergency bandwidth. That's what the guy in the suit said, calm as you please, while Karen stood frozen in her doorway, eyes bugging out like she'd just been told her house was radioactive. She looked at him. Then she turned and stared daggers straight at me. I raised my coffee mug in the most polite, screw you gesture imaginable. Turns out, Karen's janky little repeater setup had been blasting signals onto emergency radio frequencies, the same ones used by first responders. Her duct-tape tech monstrosity had been pinging a local emergency tower so hard that the FCC got involved. And thanks to my well-organized logs and wall cam footage, the entire digital breadcrumb trail led straight to her wall port. What started as a cheap attempt to steal Wi-Fi had now landed Karen squarely in violation of federal communication law. The agent escorted her inside. No cuffs, yet. Half an hour later, more black SUVs showed up, all business. Agents stepped out with gear, boxed up her electronics like it was a cybercrime bust on national TV, and logged everything like they were taking down a dark web syndicate. It was glorious. No arrest yet, but let's just say Karen was officially on the radar. And the whole neighborhood? They watched the whole thing unfold in a stunned, popcorn-eating silence as Karen screamed at the agents about hacker goats, cursed routers, and government conspiracy barnyards. By nightfall, her house had a yellow tape draped over the door and a big fat seizure notice slapped on the window. I hadn't just won. I had become legend. And Karen, she was now the woman who drilled into a neighbor's wall and accidentally committed a federal offense, all because she couldn't shell out for her own Wi-Fi plan. The war might not have been over, but that battle ended in cinematic, viral-worthy fashion. Karen went off the radar after that. 3 full days of nothing. No pacing the driveway, no peekaboo curtain surveillance, not even a single HOA citation sneakily taped to someone's garbage bin. It was like she'd been swallowed by the shame void. Meanwhile, I stayed on schedule. Porch, coffee, calm satisfaction, knowing full well the neighborhood was lit with gossip. Screenshots, videos, federal agents in SUVs. Half the block had footage on their phones. Karen wasn't just infamous anymore. She was suburban folklore. And then, on the 4th day, she reappeared, wearing the world's largest sun hat and a pair of sunglasses that did a terrible job of hiding her I haven't slept, and on furious face. She stood on her lawn like a defeated movie villain, clutching a trash bag like it might explode. She scoped the area like she expected a goat to leap out of a bush and tackle her. Nothing happened. She stomped to her mailbox, yanked it open like it owed her money, grabbed a pile of envelopes, and stomped back inside. But I recognized that look. That wasn't surrender. That was a villain regrouping. That evening, it began again. Phase 2 of the Karen meltdown. She called an emergency HOA meeting, on Zoom this time, because let's be honest, no one trusted her to lead anything in person without yelling about goats again. I logged in too, mic off, camera off, just watching, and oh man, it was theater. Karen opened with something she called the Wi-Fi attack scandal. She accused me of running a neighborhood-wide psychological operation designed to destroy her social standing. She had a slideshow, people, screenshots of her own living room filled with agents, photos with giant red arrows, captions like, "Clear targeting zone." She said the goat sounds had ruined her hearing, wrecked her sleep, and caused spinal stress, courtesy of a note from her chiropractor claiming she was suffering from sonic manipulation trauma. The HOA board sat in frozen silence, every webcam on, every face blank, like they were watching someone have a live nervous breakdown. At some point, someone muted her. She unmuted, accused the entire board of being part of a tech-based bullying cabal. Eventually, Martin, good old Martin, ended the call mid-rant with a firm, "We'll follow up privately." Screen went black. Then, a few hours later, I got the email. Karen had filed a civil complaint. She was suing me for emotional distress, malicious sound warfare, and, I kid you not, psychic harm due to intentional goat symbolism. It was the most unhinged thing I'd ever seen attached to a PDF. She filed it through municipal court, so it wasn't criminal, just petty. But I wasn't even worried. My receipts were airtight, like vacuum-sealed airtight. Logs, video footage, product IDs, timestamps, federal incident report, you name it. I called my lawyer. He read the complaint and laughed so hard I thought he'd choke on his sandwich. His first question, can we countersue for defamation, property damage, and wasting everyone's time? I told him to hold that thought. I wanted to see how far she'd take this before dropping the hammer. He grinned. If she wants a court date, let's give her a show. And just like that, the date was set. Municipal court doesn't waste time, especially when the case includes phrases like unauthorized livestock ambiance and barnyard induce. The courtroom was modest. The judge was stone-faced. The bailiff already knew Karen by name. Not a great sign for her. She walked in with binders stacked higher than her dignity and a neck brace I'd never seen her wear before. I came in wearing jeans and a button-up, holding nothing but a thin manila folder. Karen launched into her performance with the same gusto she once used to yell at kids for riding scooters too fast. She called the bleats unexpected acoustic experience. She sobbed about betrayal and neighbor-driven humiliation. She claimed my redirect screen made her iPad crash and that the flashing goat hypnotized her into spilling coffee on her lap. The judge stared at her like she was describing a dream where she married a goat in space. When she finally ran out of steam, the judge turned to me. "Do you have anything to say?" I handed him the folder. Inside, the photo of the drill poking through my wall, surveillance footage of Karen installing the repeater, network logs, redirected URLs, signal jamming records, and the big one, the FCC's report confirming she had disrupted emergency response frequencies with unauthorized equipment. The judge didn't say a word for a long time. Then he exhaled slowly, closed the folder, and said, "Court is adjourned." The judge took his time. He read through the files slowly, pen tapping against the FCC report like it was a loaded weapon. Then he looked up and said, calm but sharp, "Miss Karen, do you understand that you installed unauthorized equipment in someone else's property and illegally accessed their internet?" She blinked at him, like a confused owl. "But he made goat noises." she protested weakly. The judge didn't even flinch. He tapped the FCC report again. And in doing so, he said, "You violated federal communication laws." Honestly, I'm not sure why this even landed in civil court. Then he sighed the deep, tired sigh of a man who had seen too much HOA nonsense and muttered, "This case is dismissed, with prejudice. Your lucky criminal charges weren't filed." Karen tried to protest, but the bailiff had already stepped forward like it wasn't his first Karen rodeo. She looked around the courtroom like it had betrayed her, like the drywall and benches had conspired against her. And as she was escorted out, she hissed under her breath, "This isn't over." I believed her. But at that point, I was ready for anything. When I got home, it felt like the neighborhood was throwing me a hero's welcome. There were muffins left on my porch, a thank you card with a sketch of a goat holding a Wi-Fi antenna. Someone taped a note to my door that read, "Bleat the system." It was absurd. It was glorious. It was kind of heartwarming. People didn't rally around me just because of the goat sounds. They rallied because I did what no one else had dared. I stood up to Karen, outsmarted her, and made her look ridiculous without breaking a single law. And then something even more unexpected happened. The next morning, I found a white envelope in my mailbox, sealed with a fancy gold sticker. It was from a local nonprofit called Civic Tech Collective, the tech innovation group with a taste for mischief. Apparently, someone had sent them the courtroom footage. They called my setup hilarious, genius, and technically flawless. The note inside said, "You've achieved what we call the perfect troll. Clever, clean, legal, and legendary. Please come tell us how you did it." I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. I was being invited to speak at a tech prank symposium because I had bleated an HOA Karen into federal scrutiny. As I looked up from the invitation, I spotted her, Karen, peeking out from behind her blinds. For a split second, our eyes met. I raised my mug. She yanked the curtain shut like she was dodging sniper fire. But I knew she wasn't done. People like Karen don't just fade away. They plot. They brood, they rewrite local HOA codes in the dark, and that was fine by me. Because I had something she didn't: time, neighborhood backing, and a goat soundboard that could be reactivated with one keystroke. Then came her final move, her last pathetic gasp for control. Just when the neighborhood thought the saga had ended, she struck again, this time with a flyer. Titled "Restoring Order," it was posted on every mailbox like some kind of HOA Declaration of Independence. If Thomas Jefferson had a grudge and a glue stick. It was packed with underlined words, fake legal phrases, and new proposed rules for the HOA. Among her gems, banning hidden electromagnetic devices, requiring permits for sound emissions, and, this one was my favorite, prohibiting the thematic use of farm animals as a form of harassment. It was so ridiculous, people thought it was satire. Screenshots of the flyer exploded across local Facebook groups. Then Reddit got a hold of it. The thread titled "HOA Karen versus the Wi-Fi Goat Guy" went viral within hours. People started calling my house the barn. Someone updated our neighborhood on Google Maps to read "Barnyard Command Post." I never asked for internet fame, but somehow I had become the folk hero of suburbia. And Karen, she became a meme. There was a photo of her yelling through a fence, captioned, "Let me in. I can hear the bleeding." Another showed her lifting a router to the sky like a ritual sacrifice to the goat gods. If she hadn't caused so much real stress, it'd be sad. But let's be real, it was hilarious. Still, she wasn't giving up. That same week, she filed another lawsuit. This time in small claims court. She downgraded the charges to avoid dismissal and accused me of unjust psychological conditioning, digital ambience manipulation, and, new addition, humiliation by livestock mimicry. Yes, seriously. It was absurd. But I wasn't taking any chances. People like Karen don't need facts. They need attention. And a courtroom is just another spotlight. When the day came, I walked in with my lawyer again, this time We brought a hardbound presentation titled The Karen Incident, a technical and legal analysis. Karen waddled in with a cardboard box full of goat memes, printouts, and what looked like cassette tapes of bleeding sounds. The judge, already over it, asked her to keep it under 10 minutes. She used all of it, ranted about sonic terrorism, how the bleats had followed her into her dreams, and how she believed I had planted subliminal messages in the goat sounds. At one point, she started crying over bleats. Then the judge leaned forward and asked the question that ended it all. Did you or did you not install a device through your neighbor's wall without their consent? Karen paused, then claimed the footage was fake, said I had edited it. Her credibility evaporated on the spot. My lawyer queued up the unedited video. Timestamps, metadata, raw camera feed. Game over. The judge dismissed the case immediately. Again. But even I didn't see what happened next coming. As we waited outside for our rides, a woman in a sleek blazer approached me. Early 30s, sharp smile, badge clipped to her bag, viral justice legal media. She introduced herself as a field producer for a popular YouTube legal breakdown series, a channel that turns real court cases into high-quality storytelling content. You've got the most bizarre, legally satisfying HOA story we've ever seen, she said. Then she asked, would you be willing to share it on camera? I took a slow sip of coffee, looked toward Karen, fuming on the curb, and smiled. Sure, I said. But you'll need to bring your own goat sounds. She asked if I'd be willing to do a feature called Goatgate. I actually laughed out loud, then paused, thought it over, and said, yeah, why not? A week later, I found myself sitting under stage lights, retelling the whole ridiculous saga on camera. How I caught the drilling, built the jammer, programmed the goat sounds, and turned Karen's descent into madness into a masterclass in digital mischief. I didn't yell. I didn't rage. I just used logic, humor, and a little tech wizardry. And that video, it exploded. In 2 days, it racked up over 3 million views. People flooded the comments with gems like, this is modern art. Never mess with a tech guy. Karen got bleated into another dimension. My inbox started filling with messages from strangers across the country, folks asking for advice on dealing with their own neighborhood tyrants. One guy sent me a selfie wearing a shirt he'd made that said, bleat first, ask questions never. It was surreal and a little glorious. Of course, Karen saw the video. I know because she sent me a cease and desist letter in Comic Sans, accusing me of intellectual property damage. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He printed it, framed it, and mailed it back to her via certified mail, complete with a goat sticker on the envelope. She never replied, and just like that, she was gone. No more lawsuits, no more flyers, no more mysterious drilling through the wall. It was like the chaos had evaporated overnight, leaving behind a very confused HOA and a neighborhood that finally exhaled. The goat jammer, unplugged. The wall, patched, painted, and finally quiet. My Wi-Fi, smooth as butter, no interference in sight. For the first time in months, I actually slept. I stopped glancing over my shoulder when I went outside. It was peace. True, goat-free, Karenless peace, but the real final twist came about 2.5 weeks later. Early one morning, a moving truck pulled into Karen's driveway. No announcement, no drama, no final shriek across the lawn. Just Karen, loading boxes into the truck, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot, occasionally throwing dagger stares at my house like it owed her money. Rumor had it the FCC fines hit hard. Between her legal bills, the citations, and whatever other nonsense she stirred up, she couldn't keep the mortgage afloat. Foreclosure. A quiet crowd of neighbors gathered across the street, coffee mugs in hand, watching history unfold. Someone started clapping, then others joined in. I didn't. I just nodded to myself and walked back inside. The day after she left, I found a package on my porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a tiny plush goat wearing sunglasses. When you pressed its belly, it let out a high-pitched bleat. Taped to its side was a yellow sticky note. For services rendered, long may you bleat. I put it on my bookshelf, right next to the framed screenshot of the redirect page that once read, "Goat Alert Initiated," because it wasn't just a prank anymore. It had become a story, a saga, a cautionary tale of pettiness, absurdity, and the beautiful power of staying exactly within the rules, while your enemy trips over every single one. The neighborhood still brings it up now and then, especially when new folks move in and ask about the house with the goat sticker on the mailbox. I just smile and tell them it's a long story, one they'll hear eventually. And the best part? I still have the jammer. Still works. Still programmed. I don't plan to use it again. But if the next Karen shows up with a drill, an attitude, and a misunderstanding of federal law, well, let's just say the wall still has ears, and sometimes it bleats. That's the story, friends. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We also have dozens more stories about how Karen, the head of the condominium, is put in her place. We have sadly collected them all in one playlist. Click and enjoy. Thank you for watching.